My daughter's school is now teaching gender as a social construct, 4 sexes, avoids naming boys and girls. What do we do? Leaving is not an option. Well, I guess the first question is, I'll just take you at your word that leaving is not an option. It certainly might not be an option. I would say your best bet, and this is a casual piece of advice because I don't know your particular situation, is to find out how many parents there are around who are also not happy about this, and then start to strategize. I mean, look, to some degree, what people define as gender is a social construct. So let's look at it this way. So there are things that make men men and that make women women that are universal across cultures. So let's say, except for tiny variations, external genitalia. So, but then there are things that do vary across culture with regards to whether they're regarded as masculine or feminine, or male or female, and those are more learned. So let's say that external genitalia is not a social construct. It's not learned. If we can't agree on that, then we're not going to be able to have a discussion at all. So, but there are some things about male behavior and some things about female behavior that are culture specific and learned. And so to that degree, gender is a social construct. So, you have to give the devil his due. But the problem isn't teaching that gender is a social construct. The problem is teaching that gender is only a social construct, and that's just wrong. It's absolutely wrong. As soon as someone's doing that, then you know that you're dealing with an ideologue. And the research evidence on that, for example, is crystal clear, apart from the fact that there are morphological differences between men and women, which are quite obvious. You can name a variety of them. Men have wider jaws, they have larger teeth, they can bite harder, they have thicker skulls, as women certainly can attest to. From a psychological perspective, they are more powerful in the upper body, they can punch a lot harder, they can throw more naturally. They tend to weigh more, they tend to be taller. That's sexual dimorphism. Human beings are relatively sexually dimorphic as far as primates and other mammals go. There's difference in obviously waist to hip ratio. Women's elbows are at a different angle. They have finer bones. Women have a subcutaneous layer of body fat that men don't have. Women are a little bit more pain resistant, more pain tolerant. They also have very high levels of stamina. Women tend to have a little edge in verbal ability. Men tend to have a little edge in spatial ability. And then there are, apart from the straight physiological differences, there are psychological differences. There's a variety of them. Women are more enthusiastic. Men are more assertive. That's extroversion. Women are higher in withdrawal and in volatility. That's on the neuroticism front. Women are more agreeable and more polite. That's on the agreeableness front. Men are more industrious slightly, and women are more orderly. That's on the conscientious front. And women are higher in openness proper, and men are higher in interest in ideas, and that's on the openness front. And those differences aren't huge. There's more overlap between the genders, the sexes, than there is lack of overlap, but the differences magnify at the extremes. And they also maximize in societies that are egalitarian. And then the biggest difference between men and women that we know of psychologically is that men are more prone to be interested in things and women are more prone to be interested in people. And that's actually quite a large difference by psychological standards. And there isn't any evidence that that is socially constructed. The counter evidence is that as you make societies more egalitarian, those differences actually get bigger rather than smaller. And even the London Times 3 weeks ago wrote an editorial describing yet another study that demonstrated that. So that's like 6, and they're huge scale studies, pointing out that the fact that the differences between men and women get bigger in more egalitarian societies is now one of the most well-established findings in all of the social sciences, thus demonstrating, for example, that poor James Damore was correct, despite the fact that Google fired him for being accurate in his analysis of the scientific literature. Okay, so you've got the facts on your side. Problem is you don't know what to do. Well, there's only one of you, and that's not a good number if you're going to mount a campaign. You annoyed about this? Well, write down exactly what you're annoyed about. What bothers you about this? Okay. What would you like to have happen? Because you need to know what the problem is and you need to know what the solution is. Then you have to start thinking about strategy. And one strategy is you need some allies. You need some people on your side. Now, if this is bothering you, the probability that it's bothering most people is very high because it's very rare, especially with something like this. I mean, I would say, and I think the data support this, is that the overwhelming majority of people do not believe that gender is a social construct, that there are 4 sexes, and that avoiding naming boys and girls is a good idea. So you've got, unless you're in a very progressive place, in which case that's its own problem, you got to find some people who would be willing to go to bat with you. And then you have to find, it's a political struggle. It's a bit of a war. It's like, okay, who's pushing this? Who's the ringleaders for this? You know, it's certainly possible that most of the teachers don't want to do this either, but they're afraid to say anything. So I would say this is probably a 2-year campaign. And you have to decide if this is something that you want to put your time and effort into. And if you do, you have to conduct it like a war. You know, without the violence, obviously, but that's the right metaphor. It's like, what's the set of problems? Who's causing them? What do you want to have happen as an alternative? How are you going to tackle this? You're going to talk to your local public authorities, school authorities. You're going to talk to the local politicians. You're going to talk to the principal. Are you going to face down the teachers? Are you going to do that with more than one of you? Are you going to have your arguments in order? You know, and then on a more personal front, what are you going to do with your daughter? How are you going to educate her? Let's say you decide not to take this on the political or public front. Then you have to have a conversation with her and find out what she thinks, you know, because she'll be doubtful and dubious about all of this. So a lot of that should be asking her questions, you know. So yeah, that's the best I can do with that.